Imagine a world in which knowledge is deemed more dangerous than any weapon. In the year 1933, when the shadows of the Great Depression and political upheavals draped the planet, a single book began to vanish from library shelves and private collections. It was not a political manifesto, nor a call to revolt in the ordinary sense of the word. It was the work of Charles Francis Haanel entitled The Master Key System. Official history records that the book was banned by the church in certain regions, and its print runs were withdrawn from circulation. Why did the seemingly dry lessons on the power of thought provoke such a reaction? The answer lies in the very essence of what Haanel offered the world in 1912. He asserted that man is not a petitioner at the gate of destiny, but its architect, possessing access to the universal mind. The paradox is that the book, promising untold riches and success, itself became an object of persecution. Yet true knowledge cannot be destroyed by fire or prohibition. It retreats to the underground, passes from hand to hand, becomes a secret whispered into the ears of future titans of industry. It is said that this very text shaped the worldview of Napoleon Hill and served as the foundation for all modern self-development literature. We invite you on a journey to the origins of this power, to the place where thought ceases to be a fleeting image and becomes a creative energy capable of altering matter. The story of Charles Haanel is not the tale of a mystic living in isolation from the world, but the path of a pragmatic and extraordinarily successful businessman. He was born on May 22, 1866 in Ann Arbor, Michigan, yet his destiny was inseparably linked to St. Louis. At the close of the 19th century, St. Louis was a boiling cauldron of American industry, and Haanel inscribed his name in its chronicle not only as a philosopher, but also as a capitalist. He began his career as a simple messenger in the firm Emel & Stamping, and over 15 years rose to managerial positions. By the turn of the 20th century, Haanel was already president of the Continental Commercial Company, which united under its wing sugar plantations and coffee estates in Mexico. He was a man of action who understood the laws of the market as well as the laws of the mind. His empire grew, and with it grew his understanding that success is not the result of blind chance or mere hard work. He saw how some people, possessing scant resources, erected palaces, while others, endowed with talent and capital, lost everything. In 1912, he resolved to systematize his observations. The Master Key System was not published as an ordinary book. It was an elite 24-week course dispatched by mail. Each week, the student received one lesson, and progression to the next was impossible without mastering the previous. Its clients were the great industrialists of the era, men whose names today are associated with the golden age of American capitalism. Haanel sold not hope, he sold a technology of reality management founded on strict logic and deep understanding of human psychology. Lesson 14 of this system stands apart. If the preceding stages taught us concentration, relaxation, and visualization, here Haanel leads us to the very edge of the abyss that separates the subjective from the objective. The theme of this lesson is the creative power of thought. Haanel begins with a claim that for many contemporaries sounded heretical, but today finds confirmation in the world's leading laboratories. He says that thought is spiritual energy. This is not a metaphor. For Haanel, thought is a real force as tangible as electricity or gravity, yet operating at a finer, higher vibrational level. He writes that this energy is transmitted by the law of vibration, animated by the law of love, and takes shape by the law of growth. Consider these words. They describe the mechanics of creation. We are accustomed to thinking our thoughts are something ethereal, locked inside the skull. Haanel, however, maintains that each of your thoughts emits a pulse into the universal substance that pervades all of creation. The key idea of Lesson 14 is the notion of harmony. Haanel gives an exercise that seems deceptively simple, yet demands colossal inner discipline. You must focus on harmony so deeply that you become aware of nothing but it. The author's important warning: you must not try to create harmony, you must become it. In this subtle distinction lies the secret of mastery. When you try to create something, you acknowledge its absence. When you become the state, you vibrate at its frequency, and the world around you cannot help but attune to that standard. Thought, according to Haanel, is the linking chain between the finite human and the infinite mind. If that link is broken by dissonance, fear, or doubt, the flow of creative energy is blocked. Harmony is not merely the absence of conflict. It is the mathematical precision of tuning your inner instrument to the frequency of the universe. To understand why Haanel placed such weight on harmony, we must turn to the ancient roots of the concept. Pythagoras of Samos, who lived in the 6th century BCE, taught of the harmony of the spheres. He believed that planetary motion produced sounds of specific pitch, which merged into a majestic cosmic music inaccessible to ordinary hearing. For the Pythagoreans, number and proportion were the basis of being, and harmony the sole means for a system to exist without self-destruction. Haanel transports this concept into the realm of psychology and metaphysics. He asserts that your inner world is a microcosm that must sound in unison with the macrocosm. If chaos reigns in your thoughts, you generate chaos in your life, business, and health. This is not a divine punishment, but the automatic consequence of violating the law of vibration. In the Eastern tradition, we find a parallel in the sacred syllable Om. Ancient texts describe it as the primordial vibration from which the entire manifested universe arose. When a Tibetan monk or an Indian yogi utters this sound, he does not merely repeat a mantra, he seeks to synchronize his biological rhythms with the rhythm of creation. Haanel, a man of Western mind, translates these mystical concepts into the language of efficiency. He says that harmony is the highest form of energy economy. When you are in a state of harmony, environmental resistance disappears. Circumstances begin to align in your favor not because you are lucky, but because you have ceased transmitting signals that generate friction in the fabric of reality. Let us turn to the Kabbalistic tradition, which Haanel undoubtedly studied. The divine name, composed of 4 letters, Yod, He, Vav, He, is often interpreted as a formula for reality management. Each letter represents a level of energy manifestation, from pure thought to physical embodiment. Harmony in Kabbalah is the balance between mercy and severity, between expansion and contraction. Lesson 14 of the Master Key System teaches precisely this balance. Haanel emphasizes that thought unspiritualized by love is lifeless. Here he anticipates modern psychosomatic and neurobiological discoveries. Love in his usage is not a sentimental feeling, but the law of attraction and cohesion that draws matter's particles into complex forms under the direction of thought. In 1990, cardiologist Dean Ornish of Stanford University conducted a study that shook the medical world. He proved that a comprehensive program including deep meditation and group support could physically dissolve atherosclerotic plaques in coronary arteries without drugs or surgery. Patients who learned to enter a state of deep inner silence and harmony literally reprogrammed their bodies. What Haanel described as the work of creative thought received clinical confirmation. When consciousness focuses on harmony, the biological system ceases expending resources on survival mode stress and shifts into regeneration mode. The HeartMath Institute in California, founded in 1991, went even further. Its long-term research on the phenomenon of cardiac rate coherence shows that the heart is the most powerful source of electromagnetic emission in the human body. Its magnetic field is 60 times stronger than the brain's field. When we experience gratitude, compassion, or harmony, the intervals between heartbeats become perfectly even. This cardiac coherence instantly synchronizes brain activity, immune function, and endocrine systems. Haanel wrote in Lesson 14 that we must feel harmony with our entire being. We now know that this feeling has a concrete physical carrier, the heart's electromagnetic field, which projects our state outward for several meters. Experiments by Lynn McTaggart, described in her work The Intent Experiment 2007, demonstrate that group focus on harmony can affect physical objects and biological processes, even at great distances. Participants, thousands of kilometers apart, simultaneously concentrated on reducing violence in specific regions or accelerating plant growth. The results, recorded by instruments, far exceeded statistical error. This is precisely what Haanel called the law of growth. Thought directed in a unified surge and animated by the law of love takes form in the physical world. Confucius, the great sage of the East, regarded harmony as the highest social virtue. He asserted that the noble man strives for harmony, but not for uniformity. This subtle observation resonates with Haanel's teaching. Harmony in the Master Key System is not passive acquiescence to everything. It is active structuring of one's inner architecture so that it can channel the maximum volume of universal energy. Imagine a radio receiver. If its components are not tuned to one another, if the circuit contains interference, it will emit only static no matter how powerful the transmitter. Your task in Lesson 14 is to become a perfectly tuned receiver and simultaneously a powerful transmitter. Haanel cites many great thinkers, weaving a mosaic of epochal wisdom. He turns to the Stoics, who taught that the only way to attain peace is to align one's will with the logos, the rational law of the universe. He mentions Hermes Trismegistus and his famed emerald principle. That which is below is like that which is above. In the context of Lesson 14, this means that your personal life conditions are a mirror of your inner harmony, or its lack. If you see destruction, poverty, or disease around you, Haanel advises not to battle the external manifestations, but to return to the source, your thought. The influence of Haanel on the great figures of the 20th century is incalculable. Napoleon Hill, author of the bestseller Think and Grow Rich confessed in letters to Haanel that his success was largely due to applying the master key principles. Hill took Haanel's idea of the creative power of thought and turned it into a philosophy of personal achievement that inspired millions. Earl Nightingale, whose voice became the symbol of the radio and motivation era, called Haanel's concepts the strangest secret in the world. That secret lay in the fact that we become what we think most of the time. Yet Haanel goes deeper than Nightingale. He explains why this occurs, revealing the mechanisms of spiritual energy and vibration. Even titans such as Thomas Edison and Nikola Tesla operated in states that Haanel would have described as perfect harmony with the universal mind. Tesla claimed he did not invent his devices, but saw them fully formed in his imagination, down to the minutest detail. He tuned himself to an information stream already existing in the ether. Edison practiced sessions of deep concentration bordering on trance to obtain answers to complex technical questions. They used the master key intuitively or consciously, understanding that intellect is merely a tool, and true illumination comes from the realm where thought merges with the primordial foundation of being. In contemporary culture, Oprah Winfrey often speaks of the power of intention and the importance of resonating with one's destiny. This is a modern reading of Haanel's ideas. When you find your note in the great orchestra of life, the entire universe begins to aid you. Steve Jobs, with his passion for Zen Buddhism and minimalism, also embodied the principle of harmony in his products. He strove for technology that was not merely functional, but aesthetically and spiritually complete. This is the law of growth in action. When the thought of harmony is embodied in metal and glass, it changes the world. Haanel emphasizes that thought is the sole creative force possessed by man. Everything else are merely tools. But for this force to work, it must be disciplined. Most people allow their thoughts to wander like a flock of sheep without a shepherd. They react to external irritants, to news, to others' opinions, creating a cacophony within. In such a state, the creative power of thought dissipates before it can take shape. The practice of Lesson 14 demands 15 minutes each day of total immersion in the idea of harmony. You must imagine the whole world tuned to a single harmonious note. All sounds, the city's din, birdsong, your breathing, merge into one perfect chord. Your heart beats in that rhythm. It may seem a naive exercise to those accustomed to the hard world of numbers and facts. Yet Haanel, as a corporation president, knew this was not naivete but system calibration. If your inner instrument is out of tune, you will make wrong decisions, attract the wrong people, and ultimately fail. Calibration to harmony lets you see opportunities where others see obstacles. It gives you the mental clarity required for strategic decision-making. Neuroplasticity, described by Norman Doidge in his book The Brain That Changes Itself 2007, confirms that our thoughts physically alter brain structure. When we focus on a particular state, such as harmony, we strengthen the corresponding neural pathways. Over time, this state becomes our dominant biological setting. Bruce Lipton, in his epigenetics work, proves that our thoughts and beliefs can alter gene expression. We are not prisoners of heredity, we are masters of our biology, provided we can govern our thought. Haanel foresaw this, asserting that spirit builds the body, not the reverse. Quantum entanglement, experimentally confirmed by Alan Aspect in 1982, tells us that particles once interacted remain linked at any distance. This provides a scientific basis for Haanel's idea of the unity of all that is. If we are quantum linked to the whole universe, then our thought, as an act of observation and intention, inevitably influences the state of the entire system. When you enter a state of harmony, you send a signal through the quantum network. Haanel writes, "Thought is energy, and energy is force. Since all force ever possessed by man springs from his mind, thought is the sole source of power." There is no room for weakness or excuse in this claim. It places full responsibility for one's life on the individual. Lesson 14 teaches us that we cannot blame circumstances, government, or fate. All that we have is the result of our ability or inability to sustain harmony in our consciousness. For many, this knowledge is frightening. It is easier to believe in chance than to admit that every fear and every grievance materializes in your reality. Yet in that admission lies liberation. If you created your own hell, you can also create your own heaven. The master key is a tool for those prepared to assume the creator's responsibility. Haanel does not promise instant miracles. He speaks of the law of growth. As a seed slowly sprouts through soil, so does your thought, planted in the soil of harmony, gradually bearing fruit. In the first half of Lesson 14, Haanel lays the foundation for understanding why thought wields such power. He explains that mind is not merely a brain function, but an expression of universal consciousness. When we think, we employ the same energy that spins galaxies and makes hearts beat. The difference is only in scale and direction. Creative thought is the conscious direction of this energy toward creation, not destruction. Ancient yogic texts such as the Yoga Vasista state that the world is an idea in the mind of God. Haanel adapts this for the Western mind, asserting that our individual mind is a fragment of that divine mind. Consequently, our thoughts share the same nature as the Creator's thoughts. When we tune to harmony, we remove the distortions that prevent this divine creative force from manifesting through us. Recall the Stoic concept of the inner citadel. Marcus Aurelius wrote that a man can find refuge in his own mind if he clears it of frivolous thoughts. Haanel turns this refuge into a laboratory. He teaches that in the silence and harmony of the inner world arise the greatest discoveries and the most successful enterprises. This is not an escape from reality, but preparation for its conquest. When Haanel speaks of the law of vibration, he anticipates all 20th century physics. Today we know that matter is merely dense energy vibrating at a certain frequency. If you wish to change matter, you must change the vibrational frequency. Thought is the swiftest, most efficient way to alter that frequency. In Lesson 14, the author calls us to cease seeing things as solid and immutable. We must see them as streams of energy that can be guided by mind. The law of love, as Haanel mentions, is often misunderstood. In the master key system, love is the force of attraction. It is what makes electrons orbit nuclei and planets orbit the sun. Without this force, the universe would dissolve into atoms. In the realm of thought, love is interest, passion, and devotion to one's purpose. When your thought of harmony is infused with this force, it becomes a magnet that draws the necessary resources, people, and circumstances. The law of growth reminds us of patience. Nothing in nature happens instantly. Your thought must undergo a period of maturation. Haanel warns against impatience, which breeds dissonance and destroys harmony. If you plant a seed and each day dig it up to check its growth, you kill the plant. The same applies to thought. You must hold the image of harmony with unwavering confidence, allowing the law of growth to do its work. In this context, the practice of Lesson 14 becomes an act of supreme trust in the universe. You close your eyes, disconnect from the external world with its problems and conflicts, and plunge into an ocean of harmony. You feel each cell of your body begin to vibrate in unison with that state. You do not ask for harmony, you proclaim it as your natural condition. In that moment, you become the master wielding his key. History preserves testimonies of people who, following these principles, accomplished the impossible. We know of entrepreneurs who, amid crises, found brilliant solutions simply by entering deep inner silence. We know of leaders whose calm and confidence extinguished the flames of rebellion and conflict. All employed the creative power of thought tuned to the frequency of harmony. Charles Haanel created a system that has not grown obsolete over a century. On the contrary, with each new discovery in quantum physics and neurobiology, his words resonate ever more pertinently. He gave us a map of inner space and a key to the doors that lead to limitless possibility. Lesson 14 is the heart of this system. It is the moment when the student ceases to be merely a listener and begins to recognize himself as co-creator of reality. Remember, harmony is not a goal, it is the path. It is the continual tuning of your inner instrument. The world will always strive to upset your tuning with the noise of its fears and limitations. Your task is to return to your note again and again. In the next part of our investigation, we will delve into the mechanisms by which this inner harmony transforms the external environment and examine concrete examples of how the great minds of humanity applied these laws to achieve outstanding results. But now your task is simply to realize you are thought, you are energy, and you are harmony if you decide to become it. When you begin to perceive that your mind is not merely a repository of memories but an active transmitter and receiver of universal energy, abyss opens before you that modern science has only recently begun to chart. Charles Haanel asserted that thought is spiritual energy, and that claim, mystical in 1912, now finds confirmation in the most advanced laboratories of our time. Investigating how this invisible force shapes visible reality forces us to rethink the limits of human potential. In the mid-20th century, the prevailing belief was that an adult brain was static and unchangeable. It was thought that neural connections forged in childhood remained rigidly fixed for life. Yet in 2007, Dr. Norman Doidge, in his seminal work *The Brain That Changes Itself*, presented evidence to the contrary. Neuroplasticity is the brain's capacity to physically remodel itself under the influence of experience and, more importantly, directed thought. Thought literally carves new pathways in the gray matter of your brain. Recall the famous 2000 study by Eleanor Maguire involving London cab drivers. To obtain a license, candidates must memorize a map of 25,000 streets and thousands of landmarks, a process taking 3 to 4 years. Magnetic resonance imaging showed that those who successfully completed the training had a significantly enlarged posterior hippocampus, the region responsible for spatial memory. This was not an innate trait. The brain physically grew under the pressure of a mental task. If simple city navigation can reshape brain structure, imagine what daily meditation on harmony prescribed by Lesson 14 does to your biological computer. But the influence of thought reaches even deeper, penetrating the very fabric of our inheritance. Bruce Lipton, a pioneer of epigenetics, convincingly demonstrates that we are not prisoners of our genes. Genes are merely blueprints. The builder is the environment in which the cell resides. The most important part of that environment is the chemical composition of the blood, which is directly regulated by signals from the brain. When you experience fear, your brain releases cortisol, altering gene expression. When you, following Haanel's advice, sink into a state of absolute harmony, you create a chemical cocktail that activates growth and repair genes. In 2014, researchers Dias and Ressler performed a shocking experiment with mice. Females were conditioned to fear the scent of blackthorn paired with electric shocks. Later, their offspring, never exposed to the scent or shocks, displayed panic-type fear at the first whiff of blackthorn. The fear was written into the epigenetic code and transmitted across 2 generations. This proves that our mental states shape biological inheritance. If disharmony and fear can be inherited, then the harmony you cultivate today becomes a creative gift for future generations. The mind-body link also finds validation in psychoneuroimmunology. Candace Pert, in her 1997 book *Molecules of Emotion*, described how neuropeptides, chemical carriers of emotion, interact with every immune cell. Your lymphocytes literally listen to your thoughts. Studies by Ronald Glaser and Janice Kiecolt-Glaser showed that medical students under exam stress experience a sharp drop in killer cell activity that defends against viruses and tumors, and their wounds heal 40% slower than during holidays. This is the physical embodiment of what Haanel warned of over a century ago. Lack of harmony in thought leads to material decay. The placebo phenomenon, detailed by Henry Beecher in 1955, is perhaps the most vivid proof of the creative power of thought. Beecher found that 30 to 60% of patients experience significant relief or complete cure after receiving a sugar pill they believe to be a potent drug. Why? Because the thought of healing triggers the body's internal pharmacy. Faith in harmony and health becomes a physical reality. You are not merely thinking of health, you command your biological system to reconfigure itself according to the new image. Modern cardiology also bows to the power of mental discipline. In 1990, Dr. Dean Ornish at Stanford proved that a lifestyle change incorporating meditation and group support could not only halt but reverse atherosclerosis. Coronary plaques, once deemed incurable, physically dissolved. This occurred because patients learned to enter the state Haanel called the awareness of harmony. The HeartMath Institute in California, founded in 1991, has further explored cardiac rate coherence. They discovered that when you feel genuine gratitude or harmony, the intervals between heartbeats become perfectly even. This cardiac coherence synchronizes brain, immune, and endocrine activity. The heart generates the most powerful electromagnetic field in the body, 60 times stronger than the brain's electric field and 5,000 times stronger magnetically. When you perform the Lesson 14 exercise, you literally calibrate this potent emitter, tuning it to the frequency of creation. Lynn McTaggart's experiments, described in her Intent Experiment 2007, showed that a collectively focused thought of harmony can lower crime rates in cities and reduce stress hormones in people thousands of kilometers from the participants. This confirms Haanel's statement that thought is a vibration transmitted by a law akin to radio broadcasting. You are the transmitting station, and the quality of your signal determines the quality of your life. But what modern science now measures with precise instruments was known to ancient sages through direct contemplation. Haanel's ideas are not an innovation but a translation of timeless wisdom into the language of the industrial age. If you look far back, you will find the same principles encoded in sacred texts and philosophical treatises. Hermes Trismegistus in the Poemandrus proclaimed, "The universe is mind." This is the fundamental law of mentalism upon which the entire master key system is built. For the ancient Egyptians and Greeks, thought was not a byproduct of matter. It was the prime cause. The principle of correspondence, as above, so below, tells us that harmony in your microcosm inevitably reflects in the macrocosm of your external life. The Buddha Shakyamuni, in the very first stanza of the Dhammapada*, written over 2.5 millennia ago, declares, "We are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts we create the world." For the Buddha, the mind was a carpenter, building either the house of suffering or the palace of enlightenment. Lesson 14 of Haanel is essentially a practical guide to becoming the conscious architect of that house. In the Indian treatise Yoga Vasista*, the world is described as a projection of consciousness, like a dream. The sage Vasista instructs Prince Rama that the only way to change destiny is to change inner dispositions. When the mind settles and tunes to the highest harmony, the illusory obstacles of the outer world dissolve like fog before the sun's rays. Kabbalistic teaching on Ein Sof, the infinite light, states that divine energy flows continuously, but we receive only as much as our vessel can contain. If your vessel, your mind, is full of fear and chaos, it cannot hold the light of harmony. Haanel teaches you to cleanse and expand this vessel. The 4 letters of the sacred name Yod-He-Vav-He in Kabbalah can be interpreted as 4 levels of harmony that a person must traverse to unite the earthly with the heavenly. Stoics, such as Epictetus and Emperor Marcus Aurelius, preached internal invulnerability. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations*, "Your life is what your thoughts make it." Stoicism demanded strict mental discipline, the ability to separate external events beyond our control from our internal response. Haanel goes further, asserting that by controlling the reaction and maintaining harmony, you ultimately begin to control the events themselves. Bodhidharma, who brought Zen to China, taught direct pointing to the human heart. He claimed truth lies beyond words and scriptures. It resides in the silence of the aware mind. When you perform the Lesson 14 exercise, visualizing the world as a single harmonious note, you practice that very Zen that allows you to see the essence of things beyond the veil of illusion. Pythagoras of Samos spoke of the harmony of the spheres. He believed each celestial body, in its motion, produced a specific sound, and together they formed a great cosmic symphony. For Pythagoras, mathematics, music, and soul were one. When Haanel asks you to imagine all the world's sounds merging into one chord, he returns you to that Pythagorean truth. You are not merely a listener in this concert. You are the instrument that must be tuned in unison with the whole. Confucius saw harmony as the highest social virtue. He taught that order in the state begins with order in the family, and order in the family begins with ordering one's own heart. Personal harmony, for Confucius, is the glue that prevents civilization from disintegrating. In this sense, the master key practice ceases to be a selfish quest for success and becomes an act of service to all humanity. The Tibetan tradition of using the mantra Om as the primary vibration of the universe resonates with Haanel's law of vibration. Chanting Om, the practitioner tunes body and mind to the frequency of creation. This is not a magical spell but a technological method of calibrating biological and spiritual resonance. Moving from ancient truths to the histories of concrete individuals, we see how these principles forged the destinies of those we now call great. These people did not always cite Haanel, but they lived by the laws he systematized. One of the brightest examples is Earl Nightingale. In 1956, he recorded a short disc titled Asterisk, The Strangest Secret Asterisk. Originally made for a small group of salesmen, it became the first audio course in history to achieve gold status, selling over 1 million copies. The secret he proclaimed was simple: we become what we think about. Nightingale himself was the living embodiment of that idea. Raised in poverty during the Great Depression, he spent years seeking why some succeeded while others did not. When he stumbled upon the principles set forth in the Master Key and the works of Napoleon Hill, his life changed instantly. He realized that success is not the result of luck, but the result of tuning the mind to the frequency of achievement. Napoleon Hill, author of the bestseller Asterisk, Think and Grow Rich Asterisk, was a direct disciple of these ideas. His path began with a fateful meeting with Andrew Carnegie, the wealthiest man of his time. Carnegie tasked the young reporter with a 20-year assignment: study the lives of 500 of the most successful people and derive a formula for their triumph. Carnegie believed a universal law of success existed, accessible to all. Hill discovered that the common thread among all those titans, from Henry Ford to Thomas Edison, was their ability to hold a clear image of their goal with unwavering belief and in a state of complete inner harmony with that goal. Hill openly acknowledged Charles Haanel's influence, and it is considered that the Master Key helped him structure his own discoveries. Thomas Edison, the man who gave the world electric light, possessed a unique ability to enter a state of deep mental concentration. He did not merely invent, he, in his own words, drew ideas from the ether. Edison could sit for hours in silence, holding a metal sphere in his hand. When he began to drift to sleep, his hand relaxed. The sphere fell onto a copper basin, and the sound awakened him. In that liminal moment between sleep and wakefulness, he captured images and solutions that his conscious mind could not see. This is the work in the field of harmony that Haanel writes about. Nikola Tesla, the genius who outpaced his time, possessed an even more astonishing gift. He could construct the most complex machines entirely in his imagination. He would run them in his mind for weeks, then check the physical parts for wear. When he finally assembled the device in material, it functioned flawlessly. Tesla understood that thought is a form of energy, as real as the electricity he mastered. His life was devoted to seeking resonance, harmony between the human mind and the energy of the universe. Steve Jobs, co-founder of Apple, often spoke of the importance of intuition and the inner voice. In his famous Stanford commencement address, he mentioned how a calligraphy class, which seemed useless at the time, later enabled him to create the first Macintosh with beautiful fonts. Jobs called this connecting the dots backward. He believed one must trust something. One's intuition, destiny, life, karma. That trust is the state of harmony, when you allow the law of growth to guide your actions even without seeing the whole picture. Jobs was known for deep meditation and a devotion to Zen simplicity, a direct reflection of the principles of Lesson 14. Oprah Winfrey, one of the most influential women on the planet, repeatedly stated that the Master Key book had a colossal impact on her life and success. She openly says that the law of attraction and the creative power of thought are the foundation of her achievements. Winfrey emphasizes that you do not get what you want, you get what you believe. Her ability to maintain focus on harmony and gratitude, despite a harsh childhood and countless obstacles, made her a living symbol of how a single person can transform reality through altering inner state. These stories are not merely anecdotes of success, they are testimonies of the law in action. Each of these individuals at some point came to understand that external circumstances are merely reflections of the inner world. They learned to use the key Haanel handed us. When you begin the practice of Lesson 14, you enter this elite club of reality creators, dedicating 15 minutes each day to imagine the world as a single harmonious chord accomplishes something far more significant than simple visualization. You retune your nervous system. You change the chemistry of your blood. You rewrite your epigenetic code. Imagine you are a violin in a massive orchestra. If your string is out of tune, you introduce dissonance into the music of the world, and the world's music sounds like cacophony. But when you tune yourself to the note of harmony, you suddenly discover that the entire orchestra sounds different. Events begin to align in your favor. The right people appear at the right moment. Solutions arise like flashes of insight. This is not magic, it is the physics of resonance. Haanel insists, do not try to create harmony, it already exists. The universe by nature is harmonious and ordered. Your task is to cease resisting that harmony with fear, doubt, and thoughts of lack. Become that harmony. Allow the law of love to animate your thoughts, and the law of growth to give them form. In this process, there is no room for violence against oneself. It is not a battle with negative thoughts, but a gentle shift of focus. Just as light dispels darkness simply by being present, awareness of harmony dissolves chaos. You simply choose a different frequency. Recall the London cab driver study. Their brains changed because they immersed themselves daily, year after year, in learning the map. Your map is Lesson 14. Your goal is not merely to read these words, but to make them part of your biology. When you close your eyes and feel the rhythm of your heart beating in unison with the rhythm of the universe, you physically grow new neural connections. You become a person for whom harmony is not a concept but a physiological reality. This is the path of the master. It is the use of the creative power of thought in its highest expression. You cease to be a splinter carried by the waves of circumstance and become the ocean itself. And in that ocean, each of your thoughts is a wave that sooner or later reaches the shore of material embodiment. Recognize the magnitude of this moment. You possess a tool that ancient sages kept secret, and modern scientists are only beginning to comprehend. You hold in your hands the key that opened doors for Edison, Tesla, Nightingale, and Winfrey. Lesson 14 is not merely an exercise, it is your personal declaration of independence from the limitations of the visible world. Practice it with solemnity and deep reverence for the power you awaken. 15 minutes of silence, 15 minutes of tuning, 15 minutes in which you become the very harmony. This is not naivete. It is the most pragmatic thing you can do for your success and health. It is the calibration of the system that determines everything that happens in your life. And when you open your eyes after this practice, you will see the world around you beginning to change, because the one who looks at it has changed. This principle, laid out by Charles Haanel more than 110 years ago, permeates the very fabric of modern civilization, though we often fail to notice its presence. It is hidden in the architecture of humanity's greatest achievements, in the biographies of those we call geniuses, and in the newest discoveries of psychological science. When we speak of the creative power of thought and the attainment of inner harmony, we enter the realm Carl Gustav Jung called individuation. Jung, the great explorer of the human soul, understood that a person attains true power only when consciousness and the subconscious mind reach a state of full accord. This is precisely the harmony Haanel writes about. Jung asserted that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will steer your life, which you will label as fate. Lesson 14 of the Master Key offers a tool that lets you take the reins of that fate through conscious tuning to higher order vibrations. In the middle of the 20th century, Abraham Maslow, founder of humanistic psychology, described the concept of peak experiences. These are moments of supreme harmony when a person feels one with the world, time disappears, and creative potential reaches its apex. Maslow found that self-actualizing individuals, those who had fully realized their potential, live in a state that Haanel described as tuning to the creative power. They do not fight the world, they resonate with it. This state was later studied in depth by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi and named the flow state. Flow is the practical embodiment of Lesson 14. When you are wholly absorbed in activity, when your ego dissolves into the process, you become the very conduit of spiritual energy Haanel describes. In this state, the brain operates at frequencies where Daniel Kahneman's System 2, slow, rational thinking, merges with the intuitive power of System 1. Harmony here is not an abstract notion, but the optimal mode of functioning for the human biocomputer. Look at the world of sport, where the limits of human capability are tested. Michael Jordan, the greatest basketball player of all time, often described a zone in which the hoop seemed enormous and opponents' movements slowed. He called it the zone. In that zone, there is no effort, only pure mastery. Kobe Bryant, who devoted his life to studying the mental aspects of the game, practiced daily meditation and visualization, seeking the very coherence that today's heart math researchers speak of. He understood that victory is forged not in the muscles but in the ability to maintain inner harmony under colossal external pressure. This is a direct application of Haanel's principle, to be aware only of harmony until you become it. In big business, we see the same patterns. Jeff Bezos built Amazon on the principle of long-term thinking, which he calls a view 10,000 years ahead. This is harmony with the future, a rejection of short-term bustle in favor of the fundamental laws of growth. Elon Musk employs first principles thinking, breaking any problem down to basic physical truths. This is a search for harmony with the objective reality of the universe, stripped of layers of opinion and tradition. Warren Buffett, one of the most successful investors in history, speaks of an inner ledger. He makes decisions not based on stock quotes, but on an inner sense of rightness and alignment with his principles. This is the very calibration of the system discussed in Lesson 14. These people, consciously or not, employ the creative power of thought, directing it through the filter of deepest inner concentration. The history of science gives us even brighter examples.